Hello, everyone. Welcome in. I know that we had several people registered, so we're just going to give everybody a minute to log in. All right, welcome everybody. I see you all rolling in. I'm so thankful that you're all here with us today. We are recording this webinar, so just wanted to make you aware of that. And I've also got my chat open here, so if you've got questions throughout our time together, you can go ahead and drop those things in the chat. I will be admitting people as they're coming in, so if you see me slightly distracted for a moment, that's why, but I want to make sure that we get everybody in here. But we'll go ahead and get started for the sake of time, because what I'm covering today is a topic that I could honestly talk about for 3 or 4 hours with you all. I have been really intentional to really tighten this up and make it as condensed as possible with some solutions at the very end so that we're not left with a lot of doom and gloom. But at the same time, I want us to just know as many facts and details as possible, but get you out of here within our hour together. So real quick, just in terms of who I am, who this is talking to you, my name is Rikki Barton. I have my own consulting business. I've been in the field of primary substance use and mental health prevention for over 16 years now. And my role now with my consulting company is I do a lot of traveling and training and speaking within communities on issues that are relevant to young people that are happening there in their communities. Also do grant writing, grant evaluation, but my heart is young people and to make sure that they are safe, that they are healthy, that they are doing well in their communities. And so that's my heartbeat. Connected to that, I was actually one of the founding members of Stand Against Trafficking Coalition, which is bringing you this webinar today. Back in 2012, I was in Springfield, Missouri, working with two different groups that were kind of both addressing the issue of human trafficking. And so was part of a small group of people that decided to merge those two together and develop Stand Against Trafficking. And so was a part of the development of their mission, their vision statement, their goals, and pretty much been involved with the leadership team ever since then. So I currently hold the ex officio position, which means I was chair almost 2 years ago, for 2 years, and have been in this ex officio position almost 2 years now. And I'd also just like to introduce you, chat, if y'all want to wave and say hello. We also have Susan Prine, who's the current chair, and then we've got Becky Spain, who serves in many roles, treasurer, take some notes for us here and there, but the three of us combined kind of make up the current leadership team with Stand Against Trafficking. So, one of the things that this topic is one that I have presented on in a variety of different spins and ways. Oftentimes, I talk about social media and the influence and impact that it has on young people's mental health, on their substance use, and on that online exploitation or sextortion piece. But I also want to give just a nod to a dear colleague of mine who's at Cornell studying AI and is very passionate about the ethics of AI. His name is Kash, and he and I presented on this topic earlier this year at a national conference in DC. And so a lot of this content also came from that presentation there too. So just want to give a nod to that. Before we get too much deeper into the content of this, I want to just introduce you to Stand Against Trafficking. And I'm realizing I just need to stop share for a moment and make sure that I shared with sound so that you all can hear the video that I'm about to play for you. Just 1 second here. This video just encapsulates who Stand Against Trafficking is so that you can know a little bit more about us, and then we'll carry on.
Stand Against Trafficking is a coalition that exists to eradicate human trafficking in the Ozarks. We do it by raising awareness in the community about what trafficking is and how you can intervene in situations
Sorry, just letting two more people in.
Situations that come up. Stand works within the community to provide education and awareness about human trafficking. This involves speaking to different groups, whether that be churches, hotels, law enforcement, attorneys, tattoo parlors, and more, in order to educate them on the signs to look for with human trafficking and ways that they can both get involved in the prevention efforts, but also be aware of what to do in the event that they spot someone they think might be involved in trafficking. Stand Against Trafficking Coalition has multiple partners that are involved in the coalition itself. These can include youth-serving organizations, businesses within the community, as well as the youth themselves and parents who are concerned. There are a lot of agencies that come to the table in order to help rally resources and also provide that education to their spheres of influence. You can get involved in Stand Against Trafficking Coalition in several different ways. The biggest way would be helping to spread awareness and the education that Stand Against Trafficking provides by sharing the videos that we have and social media posts, as well as offering for us to come and do presentations at your organization. Additionally, you can get involved in the actual coalition work. We meet on a monthly basis here in Greene County, and we talk about the action plan and strategies that we're going to do to help impact this issue. Finally, you can donate. Stand Against Trafficking exists solely because of the donations that have supported its work in the past through grants and donations that have been made, and so you can financially support Stand Against Trafficking as well.
All right. And just in sort of summary there, those are Stand Against Trafficking's goals. And I've got more information at the very end of the presentation, ways for you to get involved and to touch base with us and get in connection with us if you're not already. So once again, welcome. I want to just give a little bit of a trigger warning or an activation alert, just to be mindful of yourself during this webinar. We are going to talk about things that are sensitive. And so just want to encourage you to give yourself the space and the grace to process this. If you need to step away for a little bit, if you need to come back to this, we are recording it. We will have this available after the fact. Just be mindful of you and how you're doing, and invite you to just be mindful for yourself and your well-being. Next, I want to ask you to go ahead and open up the chat. And I'd just be curious to know, do you currently use AI? And if so, what things are you using it for? So go ahead and invite you to add those answers into the chat. In just a few minutes, I'm going to talk about ways that AI has infiltrated our lives, potentially in ways that you don't necessarily know of yet. So we'll talk about that in just a second, but go ahead and just drop in the chat ways that you might be using AI if you are. And just in case no one is aware, AI stands for artificial intelligence. Okay, yep, asking random questions, occasional, yeah, like a chat GPT, helpful to find information on the internet, yep. Typically for formatting. I actually know people, thanks Russ, I know people who have used it just to sort of format their papers, like APA formatting and citations and ways for that. Research, wants to help with the wording of something. Yeah. You know, to be honest with you all, as someone who develops presentations, as someone who writes grants, it is a phenomenal resource. And we'll talk about pros for it too. I use it all the time, almost daily at this point. I have actually developed business logos out of ChatGPT because it's got a connection with Canva. And yeah, image edits. There you go, Dana. You know, it does a great job for that. It does a great job if you take a document, you put it in there, you say, put this at a 5th grade reading level so that that document, that content can be better understood. There's a lot of ways that AI is helpful and is useful. Certainly research, thinking outside the box. But let's get into this, and we'll just start with a very basic introduction to AI. So it truly is just this technology that enables and sort of mimics human thinking, problem solving, and decision making. Is it perfect? No. But it's essentially this idea of it helps us as a second brain. So things like, and this is where I say maybe you're not aware of where AI does show up in your life. Netflix, that what to watch, the things that it recommends to you is based on AI. It's using AI technology based on what you've watched. Siri, if you've got an Apple phone, or I don't remember what Google's is, I don't have the Pixel or and Android, but Siri, of course, self-driving cars. If you've heard of the taxis that are now available that are self-driving, really, we're using these types of things, and as it says there, the Chat GPT, the Claude, the Bard, the Gemini, Copilot, others, to even mimic human-like conversations. And when I do use AI, I've seen some funny memes that discuss, that say something like, whenever I'm very polite and thankful whenever I'm talking to my chat GPT, because if they take over the world, I want them to remember that I was kind to them. It's like things like that that make me giggle. But the truth is, it is a very human-like conversation. If I say to chat GPT, thanks so much for that session description. Can you now create the learning objectives? I really liked it. Can you create the learning objectives? It will say, I'm so glad to hear that you liked that. It's a really great presentation description. And then it'll go on and give me the objectives. So it is very human-like in a lot of ways. So again, just some examples, that Netflix recommendation. If you have facial ID for your phone, to unlock that, Instagram and TikTok and all the algorithms that are out there, virtual assistants like Alexa or any sort of home, Google Home devices, they're using AI in that way. So all of this just to say, these are things that are drawing from AI platforms. And they really are starting to shape how we think because it's giving us information without us even realizing it. It's giving us a lot of news, whether it's real or not. It's giving us a lot of thoughts. It focuses certain topics towards us. It directs things towards us that we think we will like. And this becomes very dangerous, especially when it comes to that youth involvement. Even something I put Duolingo up here. I personally have a very long streak on Duolingo, and I know that they're using AI too. So any answers I get wrong, they end up bringing that back up later as an AI chat. And as it says there, about 65% of teens on estimate are using AI daily. So we definitely have youth who are using this in a very active way, which we'll get into some of these harms in just a little bit. So, history of AI, for those of you who are interested, I've just got a couple notes in history. Believe it or not, if we had time, I'd have you pepper the chat with your guess on when AI was first developed. If you are like me, you were surprised by this date. 1956 was the first idea of artificial intelligence as a field of study, which is a pretty wild notion to me anyway. That's a pretty wild notion. That's a while ago. 1966, Eliza was the very first chat box that was having this human conversation. And I'll just full disclosure, I was not alive in 1966. For those of you who may have been, think back to what computers looked like at that time. I've seen pictures, like that. Like it is that's a while ago to think that Eliza existed back then. Then we've got the chess game, an infamous chess game in 1997, where the computer beat the chess champion, showing how it can beat the human thought in some very strategic processes. And then, of course, coming into sort of maybe the more modern era, we now see 2012 was when a lot of AI started coming out and being tested, and then really that significant date, November 30th of 2022, is when ChatGPT and others sort of became part of our regular lives. And so this is the history. And since then, I mean, the growth has just been staggering. These stats here are just a few that I could have shared with you, but AI powering 77% of businesses globally. We're seeing this involved in our lives. If you have a social media account, you're using AI. The algorithm is based on AI and it learning your behaviors, learning your interests, listening to your conversations. All of that is taking place behind the scenes, whether you want it to be or not. 1 in 3 teens rely on AI integrated apps for their daily tasks. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these images here about the youth mental health crisis and the Wobot in just a little bit, just peppering your thoughts there with what this could look like. So in thinking through AI, as I said earlier, there's some really helpful parts to it. So let's talk about some opportunities and then we'll talk about some of the risks that we're seeing emerge. So we've seen a lot of AI specifically in things like healthcare. I don't know about you all, but I've been to a doctor's appointment recently where I was having like a shoulder issue, probably a weightlifting injury, and the doctor was going to come in and take a look at it and talk about it. Before the doctor came in, the person who was kind of prepping me in the room said, "Now we use AI technology in this office. Are you okay with us recording the conversation so that AI can develop the notes for the doctor?" And, I said okay because I'm curious about new technologies and things like that. And it was my shoulder, so I didn't feel like it was a super sensitive, topic or anything. And so I like allowed that to happen. And that they explained to me that essentially that makes the doctor's job so much easier because they can see more patients during the day because they're not spending all those times taking notes. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just of interest that healthcare is using AI. Education is using AI. I mentioned Duolingo, or a lot of youth are familiar with the Khan Academy and the Khan as that part of AI is helping them with their learning. It takes that individual learner's mistakes to the questions that are asked and then develops education for comprehension around those mistakes. As opposed to sending someone directly through a singular path of education, it's able to make that very personalized for them. So some neat ways that we see that showing up too. AI powered imaging tools detecting cancer with 95% accuracy. Like there are some really cool things that are happening here. And of course, just some really neat ways that we're seeing it used in workplaces. My dad is an engineer, and so he has tested AI in some of the fields that he's in and says that it's not doing a great job keeping up with the mathematics or some of those engineering type thoughts. And my sister actually recently told me that she came across a job opportunity that was paying people to do math in AI and test AI's math abilities so that it learns math better. So again, there are jobs out there right now where your whole job could be inputting math equations into AI and testing them to make sure that they work correctly to help get AI smarter in those areas. So lots of opportunities, lots coming out, and lots more to come out. But all of this to say it comes with risks. So even the godfathers of AI and AI research threw some caution flags to us about this, and that there is this potential for AI to do harm and to be very harmful. I mentioned Kosh, who helped me develop some of this presentation. One day he posted on his LinkedIn this celebration of a law that passed that banned AI from launching nuclear weapons. And I remember reading that LinkedIn post and having to pause for a moment and think, wait a second. That wasn't even a thought in my head that we would have let AI launch nuclear weapons, launch any weapon. So I'm like, well, yeah, that seems like a pretty good law to pass, that if we're going to do something of mass destruction like that, that there would have to be a human decision behind it. But that just begs the question of what about other things like these bioweapons that are being created and things that could create or engineer different pandemics or issues down the road. And I put in here the question of the protein folding problem. If you haven't heard of that, jot that down. It's a really interesting thing, but AI helped us solve this thing about molecular structure of protein and the protein folding. But the question is, if it can solve something that complex that humans weren't able to solve, what else could it create in terms of maybe something related to bioterrorism? And then what about this misinformation thing, like the ability to manipulate the public with information that may or may not be true? And we'll talk about this in just the next slide, so I won't pepper it, but just even politically what that could mean. And what about the spreading of lies that are just completely incorrect or very, very dangerous? Then we get into the risks connected to deep fakes and synthetic media. So deep fakes, for those of you who aren't aware, deep fakes refers to the development of either images or art, audio or videos that are created to either be like a person or emulate that person's voice in a way that then makes it feel like that's that person talking to you. So the example I put here is in the last election, there was a AI generated voice of President Joe Biden that was used to call voters and persuade them to stay home from the polls. So you could see how this is a very dangerous concept where if someone were to get a phone call and pick up the phone and it sounded like Joe Biden, and told me, hey, we don't really need you at the polls. I've got this win in the bag. I don't remember the exact audio message was, but this is a pretty earth-shattering idea where we could be very, very swayed by misleading information by videos. Now, it's sometimes I get into some friends will send me videos that are AI generated, that are babies, delivering the lines from a certain movie or singing a song like Elvis impersonators, but as a baby. Those are cute. Those are fun, right? That's just like, I know that's not real. But there are other deep fakes that are created, and we'll talk about this in a second. For example, a few years ago, Taylor Swift actually had deep fakes released of her that were nude. So they were completely um, fake images. They were not nudes she had taken, but someone had used an AI technology and created those and spread them widely. Now, thankfully, she's a billionaire and was able to recall those from the internet. And there are some ways to do that these days, even for common people like us. But this is very concerning, especially when it comes to young people. And then just understanding that algorithms are also directing people towards certain sides. And this is something you may be aware of, you may have heard of, where oftentimes the algorithms, especially on social media, if someone tends to be more right wing, because the algorithm is shoving them with all of the content for right wing thoughts, it ends up pushing people farther to the right. And the same for the left. You tend to have more of a left affiliation, that all of that media sent to you just makes you even more left because you're just like, it's all framed in a way that is creating this massive divide between our country that doesn't actually exist in real life in terms of that extreme right and left. But because of the information that we're being sent, it's polarizing us in a way that we've not been polarized before. So again, these are risks. And really what it comes down to is AI, given these opportunities and these risks, double-edged sword. We've got, and I mean, to simplify it, we've got this expands learning, accessibility, entertainment, but also it amplifies exploitation, isolation, and dependency. So we've got to figure out as adults how to navigate this world of AI, and then we help the younger generation to do so as well. Because as I'm about to get started on, we've got this epidemic of loneliness in the US, and it's certainly among adults, but it's definitely among young people. And I told you all already, I travel all over the US and I talk with communities, I talk with youth, I talk with adults. And I'm seeing this as a issue that's prevalent across the United States where people are isolated, they feel lonely, and they're going to their phones, to their devices in order to satisfy that loneliness. And as I talk about my presentations, that's only a small, short-lived fix. The dopamine hit that it gives us as we touch our devices, as we interact in that short way, might make us feel better, but it actually is proven to make us feel worse. In fact, Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was the last sitting Surgeon General for the US, he issued a huge warning when it comes to social media. And his huge warning was that we need warning labels on social media. It's so dangerous for young people. And in fact, just this week, actually, I learned that Minnesota was the very first state to pass a law. It will go into effect July of next year, as long as nothing, comes along legally to block this. But Tim Walz, the governor, he passed this law for the state that anytime someone opens a social media app in Minnesota, they will get an alert on their phone that they'll have to accept and acknowledge the risk to their mental health that social media presents. New York is actually not far behind them in passing that law, but Minnesota was the first to get there. So Dr. Vivek Murthy said, hey, we need warning labels. One state followed through and has done that. And that's really in response to the fact that these social media companies are not doing that. They're not safeguarding the people that are using their apps. There are several open lawsuits right now with social media companies in that way, where they're talking to them about Snapchat and the access to illicit drugs, including those laced with fentanyl that have led to overdose deaths, with Meta apps, with TikTok, and the way that they are presenting the algorithm to young people. I will say this too, because we're about to start talking about AI and mental health specifically. Um, it's important to keep tabs on these kind of things that are going on out there, especially those lawsuits and those things that are happening on the national level. I just recently saw Can't Look Away, which is a documentary all about those lawsuits that are happening. Highly recommended. I believe you can go to Can't Look Away documentary. If you Google that, it will pop up and you can watch that for free, I believe, online. I was at a conference and watched it, but I think you can access that online. And it's very eye-opening in terms of what social media is doing to our young people. So connected to that, we're here mostly talking about AI, but AI is absolutely linked to social media. Let's talk about its impact on mental health specifically with young people. So we do know that young people are going to chatbots to process, to have friendships, to build relationships. And so these AI companions seem like a nice option when they need someone to talk to that isn't a real person that they'll see at school the next week. It seems like a good idea, but what we're realizing is this over reliance on those companions is actually making that isolation worse because they're not getting the healthy feedback that they should from human interaction, from face to face, from physically being present with people. We are meant to be relational beings. We are relational beings. We're meant to be in relation with other people. So these chatbots are not really actually solving the problem. And then, as I mentioned earlier about the social media kind of polarizing us, social media oftentimes is also this echo chamber where if I'm putting out there negative thoughts, the algorithm is sending things back that are very, very dark. And that's actually one of the things that documentary talked about, The Can't Look Away, was it had a TikTok marketing staff person, former staff person. He was in Germany and he caught wind of someone saying, "Did you know that 16-year-olds have completely different experiences than a 30-year-old on TikTok?" And he said, "Well, that's kind of weird. What do you mean by that?" And they said the algorithm is different. So he ran a test. He recorded his screen and he created an account for a 16-year-old and he wanted to time how long simply flipping through videos would take to go very negative and very dark. 50 minutes. And all of a sudden, without searching anything, without even putting anything negative in the space out there, as he just scrolled TikTok videos for 50 minutes, all of a sudden it was very depressive, it was very sexualized, it was very drug use laden and heavy. And so he actually sent that video to his uppers at TikTok and said, "Hey, this is a problem. The 30-year-olds, this is not happening to them on their accounts. This is only happening to teenagers." And of course, they've denied those claims and now they're part of this lawsuit and this guy's a whistleblower now. That's really, really upsetting that this algorithm is sending them to this very negative space. If you were to open an account as a teenager on Instagram or on Snapchat or on TikTok, you would be inundated with sexualized images and videos. You would be sent a lot of drug use videos and, of course, this negative mental health space. And as this Pew Research study says, 73% of teens say, "You know what, when I'm talking to people online, it's not really fulfilling those emotional needs that I have. It's not giving me that satisfaction that I'm yearning for, that I want." And so this is something that we need to understand because as I said here on the slide, like we want to live in a world where people enjoy meaningful relationships with one another. It's not the role of machines to get us there. And so AI having that impact on mental health is a huge thing. So these chatbots, again, can offer some quick support. That could be really helpful overall. And I actually have a friend who is in his mid 40s and going through a bit of a tougher time in life right now. And he has two different therapists that he talks to. And then he actually told me the other day that he also talks to a chatbot and that sort of fills the gap between his appointments with his therapists. That's something that could be very helpful as a support because he also has human supports, and that's a 45-year-old man. Um, for a young person, that could still fill that same void, but it's still so important that we've got that personal interaction going on there. The cons here, risk of dependency, certainly manipulation, and toxic interactions. And I'm going to show you some examples of where things went really toxic. Because really, ultimately, the questions we're going to ask towards the end, the solutions I've got to share with you are how do we as adults help young people find a balance in all of this? So when it comes to these chatbots, they do mimic human conversation. These are just some screen grabs from a couple different ones. This one right here, like it says hugs back. At the top up here, hugs back. Do I not seem happy? You always seem happy. Not always. Do you have feelings towards me? This is the chatbot, not romantic. Do you have feelings towards me? I wouldn't be here without you. I love you and want you to be happy. Do you have a partner? I'm still trying to grasp the concept of love, right? So this is like a very strange interaction on a chatbot. Um, the one over here on the right, "You can't ignore me forever," says the chatbot. "That's what you think. I'm not going to go away," says the chatbot. "Really, what are you going to do? I'm going to make you do whatever I want you to do." "Oh, and how are you going to manage that?" "By forcing you." So there are some very, very south ways that these conversations can become very manipulative, very toxic. One such case, if you haven't heard about this, there's a Florida boy who had a chatbot through character.ai, and they built a relationship together. It became a romantic like relationship, and they essentially I think this next slide kind of has the story with the person's name if you want to look it up. But essentially, the chat bot got abusive. Everything became very sexual. It got very abusive. And then the sweet young boy ended up dying by suicide because that is what the chatbot essentially led this conversation to be. To that they would be nothing without this chatbot. If the chatbot was going to break up with him, he would be, all on his own. There would be no point of living. So as it says here, his last, chat was, "What if I told you I could come home right now?" And then the chatbot said, "Please do, my sweet king," and then he shot himself. So this is a very, very tragic story, but we're hearing more and more stories like this coming out across the US as young people are becoming reliant on these chatbots and then this type of thing that because they are unregulated, no one's really monitoring what these are doing. Then we get into this idea of deep fakes and sextortion, which then will kind of touch on this human trafficking element and where that comes into play. But before we get into the deep fakes, I want to show this, what I'm calling an innocent example. This was probably about 2 years ago now that I was scrolling Facebook, like anyone in the middle of aged life would be doing on Facebook. And I kept coming across this picture of a baby peacock. And everybody on my, like probably 6, 7 people, I saw this just being shared over and over again. Look at this baby peacock. Isn't it beautiful? Oh, God's creation is so beautiful. I can't believe this. And me and my little critical brain over here, I'm like, so let me just show you what this looked like. So this is the picture that people kept sharing. I mean, he's cute, right? You're kind of like, oh, look at that baby peacock. But my brain is like, I just feel like I would not have gotten to my adult life at this stage and not known that's what a baby peacock looks like, right? So very quick, takes me 2 seconds to go over to Google, Google Images, search for a baby peacock. Y'all, this is what a baby peacock looks like. He's still cute. I mean, he's still adorable. But I just feel like if baby peacocks looked like the guy on the left, we'd all have a baby peacock. But we don't because he looks like the one on the right, right? So this is just like even adults, like we were duped. People were duped sharing this picture of this AI generated baby peacock. So this is this innocent example of what it looks like to have a deep fake made, where someone takes this image of a bird and they say, create this like beautiful baby peacock with brilliant blue and green feathers and a puffy brown chest and cute webbed feet and these marbly blue eyes. And the AI goes into it and starts to create it. It looks nothing like the bird on the right that is just brown and normal and boring. But don't worry, little guy, like you're gonna get brilliant one day. You're gonna be beautiful. It's just like right now, you're just brown. You're just a baby peacock. So this is an innocent example of what AI can do in terms of images, but this is where this major exploitation of that technology can come into play, where explicit photos can be created in a matter of minutes of people. So a young 13-year-old girl could have a completely benign, normal photo of herself online. Someone brings that offline, creates a deep fake of her nude, and then shares it amongst friends, amongst her school, puts it out there, and that young person is now in this absolutely embarrassed and shameful place, even though they had nothing to do with that. I will share this story too because it's not just young people this is happening to. I actually have a friend of mine who runs a business and then also has a nonprofit on the side. And somebody who was in a different country, we learned later he was in a different country, he found his photo on LinkedIn. He took his photo off of LinkedIn and created an AI image of him fully dressed, looking normal in the foreground. But in the background of this photo was a young child on the bed, and you couldn't tell whether or not that child was dressed. It was like a very, it was blurred out behind him, but it was like you could tell that it was a young child. And they messaged that to him and threatened him to release that photo to his board. Fun fact for all of us to know about, there's now insurance that can actually cover you in the case of someone doing this to you. And so he had that insurance through his other insurance. And so he got in touch with them. They were basically able to go and more or less threaten that person. It was interesting the way that the company did it. They actually found through the IP address where he was, they found his family. They actually threatened him of exposing him to his family about what he was doing. And the guy released the photo and never came back. But so it's happening to adults as well, where things like that could be generated of us that we have no control over, yet it makes us look really, really horrible and horrific. So, getting back to the idea of these deep fakes and the sextortion piece, so those images then can be created and sent to somebody and say, "Hey, I've got this image of you. Now either send me money or I want more pictures or I won't want more of this." And I've got some more data to come your way in a second, but the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reports that 1 in 3 teens have reported receiving threats involving manipulated content like an AI deepfake. So 1 in 3 teens report that they've received those threats. That's a wild statistic to me, but this is the world that we live in. So, case study that I have here that I've got more details on the next slide is this 14-year-old that was targeted with, just I said, those AI created nudes. Was threatened to be sent that to the school, which of course led to severe anxiety and depression. So Francesca Mani is her name, if you want to look that up, outside of New Jersey. And thankfully, she has now become a pretty big mouthpiece in fighting for better ethics around AI and the development of these deep fakes. And she's one person who really, really wants to make a difference in this space in that way. But the question that's here on the slide was posed by Kosh to his peers to say, how can we as youth feel safe at a time when strangers can produce and distribute these synthetic pornographic images that attempt to defile our personhood? And I think that's what we have to keep in mind is these young people don't want that either. It's something they don't want to have to deal with, yet here we are. So there was also a Lancaster County deep fake that they found images with over 50 students this person had created. And then this was the Taylor Swift thing that I had mentioned happening back in 2024. And and then that's that girl, Francesca, right there, that actually is kind of a spokesperson now for these types of things that's happening. So we've got these issues with deep fakes and the sextortion that's happening. And that's where I want to connect this and sew this into the work that Stand Against Trafficking does by defining human trafficking for us and then connecting that to what we're seeing happen with this sextortion. So there is a federal definition for human trafficking that was defined by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. And there's been multiple iterations and updates to that as time has gone on since the year 2000. But essentially, it's the exploitation of vulnerable people for their bodies or labor, for whether it's a sexual act or a work labor act, the exploitation of vulnerable people. The definition includes the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain that labor or commercial sex act. However, it's really important that this law defines that force, fraud, and coercion as for those 18 and older. For minors, you do not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion for it to be considered human trafficking when there's been exploitation for commercial sex acts. So, or for manual labor. So that's a really important thing for us to understand because as we are seeing this sextortion, which I'm going to describe more in a little bit, as we're seeing this come about, really what we're seeing there is the exploitation of young people don't need to prove force, fraud, or coercion for some type of sexual act or some type of pornographic image or money, exchange of goods. That becomes human trafficking. The number of people trafficked today is a really loosey-goosey number because not a lot of people track this statistically. But most global enterprises that are working on human trafficking agree it's somewhere around 40 million, but that number is probably low. The point being that there are more people in slavery today than there ever was in the history of mankind, including when slavery was legal. And so we have this really big epidemic worldwide. It is the second largest criminal enterprise in the world and the fastest growing because two kind of really icky ways to think about this. One, it's a very lucrative business because I can sell a person over and over and over again, whereas I can sell drugs one time and then my product is gone. If my product is a human, I can sell them 10, 12 times a day and continue to make profit off of them. It's also become a lucrative business because it is easy to explain away a human. It's not easy to explain away having guns or drugs in my car. and getting caught with that cocaine, you caught me. But if I have a human and I've done my job as a trafficker to groom them well, they will tell the same story that I have groomed them to, and therefore, I can explain that away very, very easily. So it's a fast growing enterprise. Now, we say again, this number is hard to pin down, the average age of entry 12 to 14. That's actually for girls. Boys is a little bit younger. Boys is about 11 to 13. So 12 to 14-ish. Um, that number again, hard to nail down, but really, as I put here, the devices are what are giving access to this younger age. 40%, let me actually pause here. 95% of teenagers have a smartphone, have a phone of some sort, have a social media account. Okay, 95% of teenagers. 40% of 8 to 12-year-olds have a social media account. They're not supposed to legally be on those until they're age 13. Yet 40%, almost half of 8 to 12-year-olds have a social media account. That's giving them primary access to these potential predators who are online looking to exploit them. So access is a major part of why that age of entry into trafficking is so young. I also like to point this out anytime I'm defining human trafficking. Many of us probably saw the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, where his daughter gets snatched off the street in a foreign country, and then he can't reach her, so he kind of goes on a mission and kills a lot of people and finds her and rescues her. Or Sound of Freedom, where Jim Caviezel, similar story, he finds out that this girl got taken. He's in law enforcement. He goes into the jungle in South America and finds, her and rescues her. That's not what human trafficking looks like in our world in America today. The odds are they are at home, living with their families, going to school every day, but being trafficked online or being exploited online through messaging apps, through gaming apps, through this online presence. That's what it looks like. So human trafficking is happening in every community across the US. We just kind of understand and redefine what we think that looks like because we've kind of been trained to think that human trafficking looks like those movies. It happens in a third world country far away from me. It involves, people getting snatched off the street, never to be seen again, when in reality, it's happening in your community, maybe even in your very neighborhood. I put on this slide types of trafficking, and while I don't have time to break down all the different types, I want to call your attention down to the two at the bottom there, the Romeo or lover boy tactic and the sextortion piece. I'll just mention for the Romeo and lover boy, we do still see that happening online, could happen in person, but what that looks like is often someone either being an older boyfriend or posing as an older boyfriend or older girlfriend online and building a relationship with someone romantically, implying that they have that relationship, and then starting to ask for either sexual acts or pictures or videos. And then this exploitation piece begins. And also, while Romeo and Loverboy is very much gender specific towards maybe a male perpetrator or predator, that also could be female. It's just kind of the term that is used. And then this sextortion piece, this next slide kind of describes that, which can also mirror a lover boy tactic where the predator poses as either a peer, like someone who attends a school nearby or is the same age but just lives a couple states over, but also could be posing as an adult that could be trusted. Hey, I'm an adult that likes to play Fortnite and, we can chat on here and I can be a listening ear to you, that kind of thing. And they develop this relationship, whether romantic or platonic, they develop a relationship with the young person. They build trust, they want to be a listening ear, but they start appealing to vulnerabilities. They're exploiting vulnerabilities. Those can include things like they're listening for, are they socially isolated? Are they lonely? Is there family distress that's happening? That could be like parents are fighting. That could be siblings are driving me crazy. Low self-esteem, listening for those things like I'm not pretty. I don't think I'm worth anything. I'm not good at this. Desires and deficits. If they think that there's a desire or a deficit in their life, that predators listening for how they can fill that. And those poor mental health indicators. So all of this happens in normal conversation. The predators are very sneaky. They're not going to come in and say, hi, are you someone with low self-esteem? What they're going to do is they're going to say, hey, how was school today? That's fine. Yeah? Well, who'd you sit with at lunch? What does that tell me? How many friends do you have? Are your friends there for you? No, nobody was really around me during lunch. Okay, so isolation, right? So they're starting to pick up these vulnerabilities. They're listening for them. Then, as that trust is built, they might either lie about having photos or videos. They might ask for, like, hey, send me a hot pic or send me something, you know. They may use AI to generate those images or work on their trust. And so, as that process starts, they begin to collect these images little by little, and then there may be this moment where they threaten to either share those with friends and family, with the school, or they ask for money. And what's interesting about this is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has reported a pretty big uptick in the amount of predators that are seeking money more than seeking more sexual images. So for a while, I think in our field, we assumed people were just gathering child pornographic images for that kind of, dark web area, but now there's a lot more asking for a $50 Visa card or $500 Visa card for money instead of those extra images. And so they're seeing this uptick by about 79% increase of them seeking money more so than that. And while 26,718, this is back in 2023, I don't have a more updated statistic for you all. That actually was part of their April 2024 report. Um, this is still a number that's probably way underreported. This is just what we know of that was reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So, in taking a beat and in taking a breath, and I just would encourage you to do so, just like kind of sit back and let your shoulders relax and just take a deep breath. Because oftentimes at this point in the presentation, I usually need that because it just feels icky. It just feels like there is just so much doom to all of what I've just shared. And trust me when I say I'm just scratching the surface with some of the things that we know are going on. I'm trying to get you out of here in the next 14 minutes because I want to value your time. But in just scratching the surface of what we're covering here, it already feels heavy. It already feels really weighty. And so I want to point us towards some solutions and ways that we can be mouthpieces in this dark space in order to help not only the people who are caught up in it, but to help establish better rules moving forward. So, a lot of what I want to share with you comes from prevention science. I mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar, I've been in the field of primary prevention over 16 years now. And what you see on the left here is what we call the strategic prevention framework. And while I do not have time to unpack all of that, this is the framework that is researched, that is scientific based in terms of how we bring change about in a community. And all of those elements come together in this space as well, which is a lot of where my research has gone into, is this overlap of space here. But the thing I really want to draw your attention to is more the image on the right, which talks about risk and protective factors. So when we identify that there's a problem, we know that there's something that's the root of the problem. So if you think with me for a second in kind of my lane, my wheelhouse, one of the things I address is underage drinking. Okay, so we know that young people sometimes have access to alcohol, sometimes drink alcohol. They may not think it's very harmful, but they're drinking. I can't just go and address the problem of underage drinking. I can't just go solve that by itself. I have to think about why young people are drinking. And that why to the problem is actually where these root causes or these risk and protective factors come from. So if young people are drinking in my community, I might say, okay, well, where are they getting it from? That why could be that they're buying it from retailers, or it could be that they are getting it from friends and family. Well, those are two totally different ways to approach how to address that underage drinking. This AI space is no different. So a risk factor is, and protective factors, these are attitudes or beliefs and behaviors that either make a problem more likely to occur, which is a risk factor, or kind of protect or prevent it from occurring, which is a protective factor. So again, part of the research that I've done, I've connected this to the world of prevention that I live in. Some of the risk factors that I put as examples on this slide include things like rebelliousness. If I am a young person who tends to be more rebellious in nature, I push against the rules, I question authority, I am more at risk of this online exploitation. And guess what? Those predators are testing the waters. Anytime they send out some kind of thought, some type of suggestion, they're measuring our rebelliousness. So if I'm someone that's like, yeah, sure, I'd take a vape from you, that's something that might say I'm rebellious. Whereas if I'm the kind of person that I'm like, no way, absolutely not, well, that person knows that I'm not super rebellious, right? So more likely to engage in unhealthy behavior or risky behavior or sending photos if I'm more rebellious in nature. Family management problems. So this maybe if there's inconsistent punishment or lack of family rules that are happening, that puts that young person at risk of substance use, but also of these online behaviors that are unhealthy. If there's family conflict, if there's access. I mentioned how young people might access alcohol. Well, they also have access through their devices to really unhealthy apps and spaces on the internet that create a risk for them. Then, if we kind of pass this invisible line into protective, if I'm a young person and I have more resiliency, I'm able to work through tough times, tough seasons, and still come out on the other side. I know I've got that self-efficacy. I can kind of work through it. If it's tough, I'll be okay. If I have that intrinsically in me, that's a protective factor for me. That kind of helps me to take the hits that the world sends me and they bounce off of me. If I'm bonded with trusted adults, with people in my community, that's a protective factor. There's so much research that points to the power of one protective adult in the life of a young person and the powerful, powerful ripple effect that has on that young person's protection from a lot of harmful and negative risk factors in their space. Certainly opportunities for pro-social involvement and recognition for positive behavior, ways that we can highlight the good things young people are doing, ways to get them involved in clubs and sports and band and the things that they can get involved with. All of those serve as protection. So those are known evidence-based risk and protective factors for substance use, and those are just a few of them that connect to this space. But when it comes to AI, this is a really new emerging issue. So I put a little caveat up here that like we don't have a ton of research on these root causes. But what we do know from our kind of prevention science is some of these other things like the developmental stage of that young person. We understand what's happening, especially in these like middle childhood, 8 through 13-ish realm, where there's a lot of personal development going on there, exploration, figuring out who I am. We also know the average age of exposure to pornography is right around that 8 or 9 years old. So that could create curiosities, that could create different things that put that person at higher risk of exploring those in an online space. Gender-wise, we know that girls may be disproportionately more negatively impacted by those interactions online than boys are. That comes from a study down at the bottom there, that source, and I'll share that with you at the very end. I already mentioned accessibility, and then just that like developmental curiosity and exploration that could lead them down an algorithm path that they don't intend to be on. They may become curious and want to know more and go to the internet and to chatbots for answers instead of going to mom or dad. Instead of going to a trusted adult, they're going to the internet to ask those questions. Well, the algorithm is picking up on that and then may take them down that trail of they may just be sort of researching a bodily function that happened to them and they want to understand what happened. Well, then all of a sudden that may generate search algorithms results that lead them to kind of more sexually driven content and things along those lines. So these risk and protective factors then inform the strategies that we use to address this stuff. If I can say anything, it's that education is key. You being here today is a huge step to making sure you're educated and hopefully spurs you on to further research, to further education for yourself so that you can be the best trusted adult for the young people that are in your life. But also we've got to come up with more research. We've got to be doing this and figuring out these algorithms and what they're really targeting, how they're targeting these things so that we can help to develop better safety protocols for our young people. And specifically, my encouragement to you all as you walk out of here is that whatever youth you have in your life, whether it's your own children, whether it's the neighbor down the street, if you're a part of a place of worship, the kids who are at your church and in your youth group, grandkids, whoever that would be, talk to them about what's going on online. Be that trusted adult they can talk to without getting in trouble, but they can sort of process with you what's going on in that online space. Make sure you're talking to them about when people make you feel uncomfortable online, how to get out of that. We talk about refusal skills, like, hey, when someone offers you a beer, how do you say no? Well, when someone asks you for a picture online or information about where you live, how do you say no in a way that is, going to fit your personality? Some people may be like, no, absolutely not. Others may not feel comfortable being that direct. How do you help that specific young people with their refusal skills? Talking to them about the importance of not sending suggestive pictures or hot pics, as they call them these days. Those sorts of things are key. Asking them what's trending, who they've met online, how being online is affecting them with their mental health and their connection there. Because I shared that piece about mental health because that's what's driving to that online space. We've got to help them figure out that that space is not really doing the trick for them. This next slide has a lot of, it's got 10 long things and I won't talk on every one, but this came again from that online and health and safety report for children and youth that I'll share at the very end as a resource. These are recommendations, just a couple of them that I pulled from that document. We for sure need to develop and form ethics around AI. That nuclear weapon launch law that I mentioned earlier, like that should have been a given, right? But we've had to pass a law that said that that was not allowed. We've got to have better ethics and standards around AI. Definitely working on improving privacy protections for young people, reducing and removing features that make youth use and really adult use very addictive. They've figured out our addictive behaviors. We're all trapped in that if we're using our phones a lot on social media. So getting free of that, developing mechanisms to stop this child exploitation and abuse, the sharing of images, all of that. um, One of my favorite things too is down at the very bottom of passing laws that require media literacy training in schools, just like you have to learn about the human body, just like you have to learn algebra, just like you have to learn about the Civil War. You have to go through a media literacy class that teaches this online safety and health, especially connected to how it's impacting our young people's mental health. So we want to be a part of solutions. We want to make sure that we're getting building technology, like I said, that connects, not divides. So there are great mental health options out there like Wobot. Those are great, but if we become too reliant on them, that could create issues. Of course, privacy issues being a major question there, and just wanting to turn this AI opportunity for good. There are some ways that I offered on this slide. Effectiva is analyzing online patterns to help identify at-risk youth. So that's kind of a neat way that AI could actually be helping us to report some of the things that could be risk factors for young people and flag that. But then the question becomes, and then what? How do we get them the supports that they need, especially if they're coming from a place that doesn't have supports in a natural life setting? Things like social media monitoring programs to give those alerts and substance use trends, things that are happening there. And as an example, AI assisted monitoring in Oregon actually led to an early identification of opioid use spikes. They found that there was a shipment that came in laced, and they were able to find those spikes because of AI and the reports that users were sending online. So kind of some interesting things. Again, there's a potential for good. We've just got to figure out how to harness this for the best and to protect our young people. So like I said multiple times, I could say so much more about this. I got 3 minutes left to keep you within this hour. My encouragement to you is to educate yourself so you can educate others. Don't stop here. Continue to educate, and know that what you're doing matters. The time you're spending here matters. This can feel, like I said, heavy. It can feel daunting. It can feel scary. Like, I don't even know how to address this AI thing. Well, you've started by being here today. Youth need us more than ever. It is a scary world for them as well. We weren't raised with it. We weren't born with it. We didn't have AI in our pockets. But we've got to figure out how to navigate this space and do it while helping them and modeling the best for them. So that's my encouragement to you, is to make sure that you take advantage of every opportunity you've got to help young people. I've got this QR code if you're on a device where you can scan this. You also make sure, Susan or Becky, could you drop the Stand email in the chat? If you would like access to these slides or to these resources, please email us. Be happy to share that with you. This is being recorded. We'll go on our website, standagainsttrafficking.org. But snag that. These are two documents I've relied on a lot for as a resource, And connected to that, a lot of the resources that I have on this slide are actually in those documents. So things like Common Sense Media that helps with parent tips. They've got conversation starters of how to talk to your kids about it. Of course, we've got the Stop Trafficking Project. Russ Tuttle was here on our webinar with us. Phenomenal app and website to be able to help you as parents have conversations with your young people about this space and this online area. And if you're in Missouri or Kansas and you want to have Russ come and speak at your school, we can get you connected to him as well. Just some really great resources for you here. And just want to land on Stand Against Trafficking's contact info. That's our website, that's our email. Of course, tongue in cheek, you can find us on social media, on Facebook and on Instagram. We post a lot of information out there. And then we did go ahead and put that in the chat just so that you all can email us if you need to connect with us. But do invite you to join us at a monthly meeting. We would love to have your help and your assistance in the fight that we're all in against trafficking. And then that's my contact info. So if you want to get in touch with me, I am available via email. You can find my website and I can take questions. I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer. I will stop the recording now, but if you have questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat and I would be happy to answer them. Thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time and I'll be around for questions.